Now, joining me is your favourite best-selling author of inspired works, including The Strange Death of Europe, The War on the West, and The Madness of Crowds, one of the finest thinkers of his generation, Douglas Murray. You sat down with Benjamin Netanyahu for a fascinating interview. He spoke about Israel's willingness to go it alone if need be in destroying Hamas, and he said they were on course.
Remember, this war is ongoing. We're in its fourth month. It took the U.S. and its allies 9 months to vanquish ISIS, to vanquish the radical Islamic forces in Mosul. Mosul is smaller than Gaza, didn't have this vast terror underground infrastructure, had fewer fighters. So we're on course, but it's going to take some time.
Douglas, he is under enormous pressure, both at home and internationally. What did you make of his resolve?
Yes, we sat down for half an hour in Tel Aviv. And one of the interesting things about him is that, of course, he knows he's under this incredible international pressure, including from America, to wrap up the war in Gaza. But he also knows that Israel has been through multiple rounds of wars in Gaza. And every one starts again because the conditions for the next war are effectively laid down in the ceasefire of the previous one. He knows that if Hamas is left in any way standing, they will regroup, and in another couple of years, the same thing will happen again. And so he's trying to fulfill his objective of destroying Hamas. At the same time, and I asked him about this, he's trying to negotiate for the release of the remaining hostages, the remaining Israeli hostages. That's an incredibly hard conundrum right there. Then when you add in the likelihood, in my view, of war in the north with the Hezbollah armies amassed on the southern Lebanon border and much more, this is a remarkable and a challenging time for anyone, but particularly, I think, for Israel, particularly for him.
And what's the climate at home? Is he supported? Are people questioning his judgment, or are they backing this effort?
Well, polls show only about a quarter of Israelis wanting him to remain on. That's at the moment. He would say in relation to that, well, that's polls, and I don't really care. Of course, as the most successful prime minister in Israeli history, the most long-running prime minister in Israeli history, of course, he's always kept an eagle eye on the polls and his own opinion ratings. He was very careful. I pushed him on the question of personal culpability for October the 7th, for the multiple failings that clearly went on the Israeli side that allowed such a barbarous attack to get into Israel. He was unwilling to be pushed on that very much because he knows that if he says, I'm sorry, or I take responsibility, his political opponents will use it against him immediately. He's obviously going to have problems within his coalition whenever the war winds down. So yes, I mean, but I asked him about this, and I asked him about his political future. I said, is it the case with you, as it is with many politicians, that their careers end in failure? And his response was, I don't care. He said, I just want to do what's right for this country, and the rest, he said, the sands of time just wash away.
Now, you better get on the phone and tell Bibi to implement an immediate ceasefire, because the Chicago City Council, led by Mayor Brandon Johnson, has just passed a ceasefire resolution. That happened yesterday. Let's have a look.
I vote aye. Yeah!
Does this idiocy still surprise you? The cheering, the clapping, a city council passing a resolution for a ceasefire in a Middle East conflict. What do Israelis make of the reaction in the West, not just in the US, but UK, Australia as well?
Well, I have to say, by the way, watching that footage from Chicago, it reminds me of your previous segment, Rita. I mean, these are narcissists. Parading themselves, but they're not doing anything. Israel, like any other country, wouldn't be voted into a ceasefire because of the council in Chicago. Of course, it's just grandstanding and posturing, but it's very ugly, of course, because these people who've been doing this have been doing it from day one. They've been doing it from October the 7th, October the 8th itself. All these people called for a ceasefire of Israel before Israel's even fired anything. Um, but I mean, personally, I think that it'd be much more useful for the citizens of Chicago to urge the Council of Chicago to call for a ceasefire in Chicago, because Chicago has one of the highest gun crime rates anywhere in America and in any developed country. You can have just, I mean, it's not even mass shootings, just individual shootings that add up to dozens of people wounded in an average weekend in Chicago. So I would urge them to look to home before they decide that they've got home so well sorted out that they can also afford a foreign policy in Chicago.
Good advice there. Now, you've written a piece today for The Spectator where you say the Tories have nothing to run on. What do the modern Tories stand for? What has happened to their conservative credentials?
That's a very good question. It's entirely unclear what they do stand for at the moment. Rishi Sunak seems to have made banning disposable vapes his main ambition of late, and I've always liked to think that the country could do more than that. But you know, it's very strange. As I say in the piece, it gives a different meaning to the fag end of a Tory government. But the strange thing about the Conservatives is they've been in power for 14 years now. They've rotated through prime minister after prime minister. All of them have this increasingly glazed look on their face, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that they just have proved to be so weak in office. I mean, just this week we heard that a Conservative MP is going to stand down because of threats to his life from jihadists, the burning of his office by some extreme Muslims, and the fact that his colleague Sir David Amess was killed by an Islamist who was apparently also going for this guy. And everyone's like, oh, it's sad that he has to stand down. No, it's disgusting and disgraceful for our country that we would be in this position. But you know, this is a case on issue after issue. Immigration, they say stuff and then they don't do anything. They said they would reduce immigration to the lowest since the 1990s, and it's gone to historically high levels, closer to 1 million a year net than tens of thousands. So I think that, but I think very quickly, I think that the main thing is, Rita, that they've run out of the possibility of promising people a better life. The left runs on envy in its politics, and the right needs to run on aspiration. That you don't envy the other guy, work hard, and you'll get what the other guy has. And the Conservatives have not been able to do that because, among other things, they haven't been able to create a property-owning class among people in their 20s and 30s. So, you know, they've been in power for 14 years, and the question is, what did you do with it?